All right, students, what I'm going to do today is take a look at this free response question that's one of the provided practice free responses for the AP English Language and Composition exam. And I haven't read this one ever before. I haven't seen it ever before. So this is my first look read through. And I want to go through the full reading and annotation process just to give you some insights, give you some idea of what are some things you could talk about if you were writing this full essay in a testing environment. So I'm going to go ahead and get straight to it by reading the prompt. The United States participation in the Second World War began in 1941 and lasted until the Axis powers surrendered in 1945. During that period, on September 24, 1942, Congresswoman Clare Boothe Luce delivered the following address: "The Role of American Women in Wartime," to a Women's Banking Committee. Read the passage carefully, write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices Luce makes to convey her message that women needed to prepare to make more sacrifices as the war effort continued. All right, so they kind of give me, at the very beginning, an idea of what the overall purpose of this text is, so I'm going to immediately grab onto that. They're asking me to write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices, so I know this is rhetorical analysis style essay, the rhetorical choices Luce makes to convey her message that women needed to prepare to make more sacrifices as the war effort continued. So she's trying to convince her audience that women should make sacrifices to support the war effort. Okay. In our response, we should do some of the following things. We should respond to the prompt with a thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices, select and use evidence to support our line of reasoning, explain how the evidence supports your line of reasoning, demonstrate an understanding of the rhetorical situation, and use appropriate grammar and punctuation in communicating your argument. So I'm going to take a moment at the beginning to touch on the rhetorical situation, because a lot of times they provide that for us in the language of the prompt. Here, part of our rhetorical situation has to do with the time and place that this is written. It's written in 1942, so it's just after the United States has begun participating in the Second World War. They started that in 1941, and then this is September 24th, 1942, that this text is written, delivered. So it seems like this was given by a congresswoman. So that's part of our rhetorical situation here, is that we have to identify our speaker, and in this case it's a congresswoman, Clare Boothe Luce. And it seems like, actually I'm going to revise my previous statement, rather than this being something that was written, this is just a recorded version of an address that she gave to a women's banking committee. So presumably she was reading from notes, but this was first given orally. This was a address, meaning like a speech that she gave to a women's banking committee. So this is a woman who's in a position of political power and authority. She's a congresswoman, and she's delivering this address, this speech, "The Role of American Women in Wartime," to a women's banking committee. So Women's Banking Committee, I'm going to go ahead and make some assumptions there that she's speaking to other women who are in a position of authority, who are not necessarily all just made up of stay-at-home wives as like may have been stereotypical in 1941, but this is a powerful woman with political influence. She's a congresswoman who is speaking to some other powerful women. So the Women's Banking Committee, like I said, is probably not just made up of women who are homemakers or stay at home with their families, but this is a powerful woman, Clare Boothe Luce, speaking to other powerful and potentially politically influential women. So I want to make sure that we're kind of aware of that as part of our rhetorical situation. And part of her goal here, which is already kind of stated, is that she wants to say to this committee that women should prepare to make more sacrifices as the war effort continued. Okay, so now I'm going to actually start reading the body of the text now that we have some details of our background rhetorical situation in mind. And now I am going to say something which I could only say among us girls. So far in this war, we are still the luckiest women in the whole world. For instance, we still have lipsticks and even some silk stockings. And although many of us have gone into uniforms, they are still made of good cloth and are well cut. Sisters, for a lot of us, perhaps too many of us, important though the part we have played in it so far, it is still easy, and I almost said glamorous for us. But believe me, for each of us, these are the good old days now, my friends. Something that I'm going to note as I've been going through here is she's speaking to these other powerful women. She uses some very carefully chosen words to identify with the women she's speaking to. This phrase, us girls, is a phrase that I think you would normally see used in like a gossip column or in informal lunchtime conversation with a group of women. So there's almost that inclusive but kind of childish tone to it. Later on, she uses the term sisters as she's identifying with all of the other women in her audience. And then she concludes with my friends, which is gender neutral. But I think it's interesting that she's using these gendered and in some cases like even childish gendered words to identify with or refer to her audience. And so those are some of the moves that maybe we would comment on if we were analyzing the writer's diction. We'll continue. Now we've got to face a great big fact. We've got to face the fact that the interesting part of our participation in this war effort is just about over. There isn't going to be any glamour in what we have to do from here on in. I realize that for most women, there is little that is glamorous in a war, any war. But we have to be frank enough with ourselves to admit that in our effort to help, we have still managed to do a lot of things that are both helpful and, by a remarkable coincidence, attractive. We've been able, as we went about our wartime activities, to find time to wonder, as I say, a little about those uniforms. We've had time to be disturbed a bit about the freezing of fashion designs, about the lack of silk stockings. Yes, we found time to look a little for glamorous. But from here on in to victory, glamour is out and toughness is in. From here on into victory, girls, the way is going to be hard. And note, we see girls again right there. From here on in, women and men and children too, for that matter, are going to have to take on the serious task of winning this war. I'm going to note here that she shifts. Rather than calling them girls in this sentence, there's a tone shift, and she's using the word women. I think that that's intentional and significant. Our president has called this the toughest war in history, and whether you here tonight class yourself as a political follower of the president or one of his political opponents, you must accept that definition as completely accurate. What then are we women, and we see now women, not girls, going to do in the tough days that lie ahead? Well, we're going to do a lot of the things we are doing right now, but we are going to do them a lot more intensely, and if you will pardon me, a lot more intelligently. Interesting. We'll go ahead and move on to our next page. With our men, we're going to work and fight for victory. We're going to submit, but we're going to understand why we submit to rules and regulations. We're going to take and manage with more and more rationing. We're going to have colder homes, different foods, less clothing. We're going to accept the challenges imposed by these conditions. We're going to keep our homes and jobs going because we know, being women, what happens if we don't keep them going. So I think that we're seeing some more evidence of our shift here, and I'm going to use some of my background knowledge. I know that during World War II, rationing in particular, meaning not being able to buy whatever you wanted at the grocery store, but only having things available in certain quantities, like you could only buy so much butter, so much sugar, so much flour. Part of that was all part of the war effort. And Luce here is acknowledging that the rationing not just food, but even something like heating oil or clothing supplies, all of that rationing was to allow more of those goods and supplies to go to the soldiers who were fighting on the front lines. So it seems like that's part of what she's identifying as the role and the task that the women have ahead of them. And again, she's moved away from saying us girls to now identifying them as women. The more mature, the more responsible, the maybe more empowered term that she's choosing to use here to refer to their responsibilities, not just to make do with less, but also to keep our homes and jobs going. So I'm thinking about Rosie the Riveter here. The jobs that they're keeping going, a lot of them at this time were not just the traditional roles that women had, but women were taking on new roles in the workforce, roles like working in factories, on assembly lines, even secretarial work, which had traditionally been viewed as a male profession. Women were taking on new jobs, and it seems to me like Luce is encouraging them to take that responsibility seriously and to continue moving forward with that. The women of the next few years, and please believe that my use of the plural years, while pessimistic, is honest, the women of the next few crucial years are going to see that their children, those precious treasures for whom we fight, are kept healthy and warm and well-fed and well-schooled and as happy as possible under conditions which are bound to become less and less favorable and not at all glamorous for anyone from here on in. Yes, ladies, the road ahead is going to be a bumpy one. It is going to be full of ruts and rocks, the ruts of endless colorless effort and the rocks of almost insurmountable obstacles. It takes no gifted prophet to foresee this road to victory. A soft war leads to a hard peace. A hard war leads to a happy peace. We must fight a hard war. I think we will not much long kid ourselves that this war can be won by an effort which, though extremely great, is still a comfortable one. I think we are coming to the grim realization that such dreams of comfort are insidious saboteurs of our war effort. So a couple things I want to note here in this paragraph before we move on to the last one. When she says we must fight a hard war, this is the inclusive pronoun. So the we, she's speaking to this group of women, and she's identifying that it's not just the men on the front lines that are fighting this war. We includes the women at home. The war that the women are fighting, although it's not with bullets and guns, is the war of rationing and keeping things going at home. And also some of the more traditional roles of women that we see in the previous paragraph of seeing that the children, those precious treasures for whom we fight, are kept healthy and warm and well-fed and well-schooled. So it's identifying that even something that is a traditional role of women, keeping the children cared for and raising them, that is still a fight, a war, a part of the overall effort that she wants to encourage women to do responsibly, to do well, and to do with perseverance. This last line in that second to last paragraph here, I think that we are coming to the grim realization that such dreams of comfort are insidious saboteurs of our war effort. So this is a pretty compelling counterpoint to maybe her anticipated objection. She's maybe imagining a lot of women saying, oh, well, can't things just get back to the way that they were? Can't we just return to our comfortable lives? And she's directly taking on that objection that many women are probably experiencing. And she's saying that those dreams of comfort, of moving away from rationing and responsibility and working jobs that maybe are tough and they're not used to, those dreams of comfort, of moving away from those things, are insidious saboteurs of our war effort, meaning they're evil, malicious forces that are going to completely undermine the war effort and will contribute to failing in the effort to win the war. We've got to come to some grim conclusions in the days that lie ahead. We've got to come to the conclusion that it will not be won until we all fight to win it. Again, here we have that inclusive language. We all fight to win it. Every minute of every hour of every day from here on in. We dare not measure our effort by its drain on our comforts. We dare to measure it only by its contribution toward the victory for which we fight. All right. A couple notes before I wrap on this. This word glamorous here is also one that, if you're paying attention, you probably saw repeated several different times. I think that the notion of glamour kind of shifts from the beginning of the essay to the end, from the beginning of the speech to the end. But she continues using that term glamorous as a touchstone to get back to this idea of what are the things that women care about. The things that women care about that she's reflecting on early on in the speech are still having lipstick and silk stockings, things that are traditionally identified with the glamour of womanhood. But she's kind of substituting that preference for glamour, those dreams of comfort, with a tougher, more robust version of the responsible American woman who's going to be a significant and, in fact, an essential part of winning this war. So it seems like, if we're going back to the beginning, her overall purpose is to convince her audience that women should make sacrifices to support the war effort. It seems like those sacrifices she's talking about include physical things like rationing of food, include their various work responsibilities, both in the home and in the workforce. But it also seems like the sacrifice that Luce is inviting women to make is a sacrifice of changing their mindset from what a woman's life is supposed to look like, that glamorous, comfortable life full of silk stockings and lipstick and comfortable things around the house, and replacing it with a sense of deep responsibility and this sense that all of the struggles and hardships that these women are choosing to undergo on the home front are essential elements of allowing the country to reach victory on the war front. It seems to me like that's kind of her angle that she is using for her argument, to ask not just that women adhere to those rationing rules and regulations, but also that they allow themselves to make a shift in their own perspective about what their lives ought to look like in this time.